Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has asked international financial institutions to cancel the debts of member states to help them withstand the fallout of the coronavirus pandemic. The West African country received $3.4 billion in emergency financing from the International Monetary Fund last week, but currently holds no outstanding debt with the global lender. Nearly half of Nigeria's outstanding external debt is with multilateral lenders led by the World Bank Group with about $10.1 billion. Joining me to talk about this is the Chief Economist at BusinessDay, Dr. Nonso Obikili, to discuss further on this issue of debt. Good morning to you, Nonso. Thank you so much for joining us. So, assuming what the President said is true, does this request to cancel debt forgiveness, does that illustrate the seriousness of our current fiscal situation?
I think you kind of understand the context in which they're asking for debt forgiveness, right? There's a global pandemic, and a global pandemic implies that everybody needs to work together to get rid of the virus. And so if you have countries that are constrained financially, then that reduces their, power to get rid of the virus, and that impacts everybody else. And so from that context, there's a logic to asking for some debt relief. Now, whether that translates into overall debt cancellation, I don't know. I don't think so. If you look at Nigeria's structure in particular, most of our debt is still domestic debt held by pension funds, banks, and you can't cancel that without have serious implications. And a big chunk of our foreign debt is held in Eurobonds, which some which are also held by Nigerians as well. So I think in the context of debt cancellation, I don't think that is a particularly feasible strategy, not for Nigeria, not for most of the holders of the debt. But in terms of debt relief, I think there might be some logic there to try to help countries deal with the pandemic, just because it's a global public issue and not a country-specific issue.
All right, a pretty obvious question here for our viewers, for anyone who doesn't know. Can you just give us a quick differentiation between debt relief and debt forgiveness?
Well, if you have debt, every few months you have to pay something. You have to pay part of the interest, you have to pay the running costs or whatever, right? So there's a regular cost to servicing debt. Now, postponing that or getting rid of that temporarily is what we generally think of as debt relief, because it gives you time to spend your funds on other things besides just servicing debt. And of course, debt cancellation is debt cancellation, canceling debt entirely. And so there are two different things there. One is designed to kind of give you space to spend on things that count right now. One is to get rid of the debt entirely.
Thank you for that. So again, if I'm to understand you clearly, that's, as far as the cancellation, debt forgiveness, that's not a realistic strategy as to right now. How realistic is that with any of those institutions actually taking up the president on what he's requested?
Well, again, from the perspective of those institutions, it's not a feasible tactic, because remember, they are financial institutions. Their lending depends on people paying what they owe, right? They don't manufacture money from anywhere. They get some funds from countries who subscribe, but most of their funds come from loans that they've given that are paid back. And so if everybody decides to, if there's a broad debt cancellation agenda and everybody has their debt cancelled, then these institutions, start to look for funds to continue their programs, which again might be detrimental in the long run or in the medium term. So I think if it was one or two countries, or if it was a subset of poor countries, then you can make the case. But given the scale of the pandemic, given the number of countries that are currently seeking for IMF or World Bank, intervention of some sorts, I don't think broad debt cancellation is a feasible strategy.
All right, thank you for that. Now, you have an article out in BusinessDay where you make the case that Nigeria might have to approach the IMF again for actually a formal loan that comes with concessions. But you also write about Nigerians getting past what you call a 1980s SAP PSDT. Can you actually give some color to that and describe that a little further for us?
Well, if you ask the average Nigerian, what do you know about the IMF, for example? They will say, IMF, they're the ones who forced SAP on us, that destroyed the economy, and so on and so forth. And, basically, you get the idea that, people don't like the IMF. It's not just a Nigerian thing. It's a common thing in many developing countries. People see the IMF as some kind of agent of economic destruction. But in Nigeria's context, that's very far from the truth. If you think about our history with the IMF, the big history is with SAP, but the problems before SAP started from the 1980s, from the early 1980s, where we built up all sorts of economic issues. We had massive fiscal deficits, had serious debt issues, had foreign exchange misalignments, had all these problems before we even ever went to the IMF or attempted to go to the IMF. And so the idea that SAP destroyed the Nigerian economy in the 80s it's not true, right? Simply because we had so many issues before SAP, and SAP was designed to resolve some of those issues. Now we're in kind of a similar situation where we have lots of imbalances, lots of challenges. From the IMF prediction, for example, we're expected to grow at a negative rate per capita until 2025, which is really bad considering our economic position. And so if we're looking for options to get out of the economic mess we are in, IMF and other institutional lenders are potential options. But of course, a proper package, a proper lending program comes with lots of economic adjustments that must be met. And so I argue that, look, we need to reevaluate what we think about SAP. We need to go back and actually study what happened and come to terms with the idea that, look, the IMF offers a potential path out of our economic mess, and we shouldn't be so hung up on these historical narratives. We shouldn't shoot ourselves in the foot, to put it that way.
Okay. Also, I want to ask you this, although we've got about a minute, we're going to take a quick break. We want to stick with you, though. As far as debt is concerned, good debt has been described as, for a sovereign nation where citizens can benefit from it. In your opinion, how do you think Nigerians has benefited from what we've borrowed so far?
We've had this common line of we are borrowing to pay salaries. And so we've run fiscal deficits for about a decade simply just to keep the government afloat, to pay salaries, to service other debt. And that's not a particularly good way to use debt. Now, debt itself is not bad. You can use debt for all sorts of reasons. But if you use debt for superficial kind of spending, then it becomes problematic, simply because generating enough revenue to pay it back, it becomes difficult. But if you use debt for useful things, then debt is not particularly bad, as long as it's sustainable, not particularly bad. And so I think the question we need to ask is what exactly are we using debt for? Are we using debt just to, keep pay salaries, keep government officials afloat?
Okay. One second.
For something more useful, then but maybe it might be useful.
Stick with us after the break now. So we'll be right back to talk about the AFCT, and we'll be back. So hang on. All right, welcome back to the Global Business Report on Arise News. We're talking with Dr. Nonso Obikili, Chief Economist at BusinessDay, about debt. Nonso, thank you so much. You were just giving us your thoughts about good debt and how it can be put to good use. Still within the context of the pandemic, I want to ask you about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The Brookings Institution put out an article where they said that it can assist, that's the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, if it's pushed through, can assist African nations in dealing with future pandemics. I wanted to get your thoughts on what they put out.
Well, I think it's a particularly good argument. I think when you're thinking about things like pandemics, resilience becomes very, very important. Being able to have enough food stocks to deal with temporary shocks, being able to have access to places that have, essential commodities that need to be sold. And no one country can operate, in isolation. And so the whole idea of the AFCFTA is about cooperation on trade. And during times like pandemics, cooperation is very, very important. And not just cooperation that's ad hoc, cooperation that's systematic. And I think, the structures of the AFCFTA can help in the event that we have another future incidents like this. We probably will. And a good way to think about it is to try to imagine, for example, what would happen to Lagos if, for whatever reason, Lagos could not get food from the rest of the country. Right? Lagos would find it much, much more difficult to cope with the pandemic. But the fact that we have, relationships between Lagos and Ogun and the rest of the country, and food can continue to flow in and out, essential medical supplies can continue to flow in and out, then Lagos is better off for that. So that's the whole idea behind AFCFTA being particularly useful for African countries. And Nigeria is a big economy, and so for us, it's a bit. We're much more likely to cope in the event of this kind of global shock. But for smaller economies like Malawi, like who rely on international trade, the AFCFTA is particularly even more useful because it means that they have the structures to deal with the temporary shocks. I think that's the logic of the argument. I think I agree with that completely.
Okay, great. Still sticking with that. So the operational launch was supposed to be July, and now that's been pushed back. There were some strategic meetings that were supposed to take place, I believe, this month, but they might not happen until later on. Should it be made a priority, despite COVID-19 taking up so much attention of all these African nations?
I think the AFCFTA needs to be done right, and I think. It'll be detrimental, I think, in the medium term if it's rushed through and proper structures are not in place. And the pandemic now means that there's a lot of restrictions that kind of impede the ability to do it right. Many countries have shut their borders for health reasons, which is, you can't complain about that. The potential for meetings and interactions has been severely restricted because people can't gather and discuss anymore. And many countries are fighting, public health battles, which kind of puts every other thing on the back burner. So I think there's a logic to postponing the launch. If it had launched already, then it would be a different story. But I think there's a logic to postponing the launch. But I hope it's not postponed for too long. I think it's something that has been worked on for a long time, and we want to see it happen sooner rather than later.
Okay, and you did mention borders being closed because of health reasons. We closed our borders back in August of 2019. That didn't have anything to do with health reasons. That was because of smuggling and so on and so forth. For us and our participation in the AFCFTA, is that, in your view, is that still a reality? Despite the hiccups, we'll have to get past COVID-19 borders and other things.
Yeah, I think it's a reality. I don't think there's any likelihood that the rest of Africa would form a trade agreement like that and Nigeria would not want to participate. I think, of course, we'll have temporary disagreements. We might have temporary policy issues like border closure. But I think ultimately we will be on the table when the AFCFTA launches.
Fantastic. Okay, final question. So going back to the issue of debt now, how do you see things? I'm going back to the article you wrote with us and the IMF. Do you think at some point we might actually be forced to go and get this formal loan from the IMF?
Well, I don't think force is the right language to use. I think it's an option that would be good for us to take. But ultimately, I don't think we're at the point where we have to take anything. I think we're still lucky, in some sense, that most of our debt is domestic. So there's a lot of room to maneuver there. And despite what we say about fiscal deficits, we still have a relatively very small government. The government spending is only about 6% of GDP or so, which means that there's a lot of room for the economy to absorb, whatever fiscal deficit that they are. It might not be the best option, but there's an option there. So I don't think we will get to the point where we face no choice but to go to the IMF. But I think we shouldn't see it as a case of being forced to go there. We should see it as an option that can be useful to us, right? And so I think that's the perspective we need to think about our relationship with the IMF. It's not it's a quid pro quo, to use that term, right? They have something to offer, and we can take advantage of that. We shouldn't be forced to go there before we go there. We should consider the option, consider the benefits and the costs, and make a decision.
All right, Dr. Nonso Obikili, Chief Economist at BusinessDay. Thank you so much for your time in talking to us about debts for Nigeria and also how the African Continental Free Trade Agreement can possibly help African nations deal with pandemics in the future. I appreciate your time.